I'm going to start with a question for all of you. When life gives you lemons, what do you do? Lemonade. That's what people say. Actually, I'm going to challenge that. When life gives you lemons, why not take the seeds and plant your own lemon tree? And that's my entire philosophy as a writer and as a woman as well. It's not only a book, that's the name of my first book, but it is also my mindset and the way that I look at life and the way that I encourage people to look at life. I'm not going to give you a lecture on what that means because I'm an author, and authors don't do that. Authors share stories. So I'm going to share a little story with you all. And by the way, I think it's very timely that they put this venue of Under the Tree to talk about the lemon tree mindset. I did not ask for this. So a little story about myself. I used to be a corporate girl. I used to be in the business world, and I worked for the biggest companies out there. I worked at Apple for 7 years. I worked at Estee Lauder, a big American skincare company. And I was very proud about it. I used to say, I'm Veronica from Apple, or I'm Veronica from Estee Lauder. And in a kind of twisted way, I became a little bit the extension of the companies and the work that I was doing. But was that really who I was? And then something happened, the pandemic. 2021, I left Hong Kong, which is where I'm based. I'm originally from Spain, but I live in Hong Kong with my family. And as you know, everything was very tough. It was very difficult to travel around, but my family had barely seen my daughters. And so I decided to go on holidays to Spain for my family to see my daughters. And what happened as we landed is that Hong Kong shut the boundaries, shut the borders, and we were not able to come back. So we thought things were going to get better, and a month later, it was worse. 3 months later, it was even worse. So we decided to move to Australia. My husband is from Australia. And again, I thought that things were going to get better, but it didn't. So my daughter, my youngest one, forgot to speak English. She started to speak Spanish in Spain, and she forgot about it. And so when we were in Australia, I decided that I was going to look for a job. And I sent CVs, and I talked to people, and I did all this networking, and I wasn't able to find a job. What happened was something quite new for me. I felt very rejected. I felt that I was a foreigner in a new country. I didn't have a network. I have an accent when I speak English, as you can tell. And so all of that made it quite difficult for me to be able to find a job. And so I felt that life was giving me all these lemons, and I was like, well, what am I going to do with this? And at some point, and it took me 6 months of rejection, and I had a pile of no's in my inbox, that I decided to turn things around. And there was this one day that I was walking on the beach with my daughters, and I said, I have to change my mindset. I have to stop complaining. I have to stop being a victim, because I cannot control what is happening outside. I cannot control the environment. What I can control is the way that I respond to it. And so instead of saying, I'm not able to find a job, I said, what if I created my own job? And that's when I realized that I didn't have to be Veronica from Apple or Veronica from any other company. I was able to create my own lemon tree. And that is the precise day that I started writing. I started writing. Is any of you a writer here as well? Does anyone write, even if it's privately? Diaries, perhaps. So for those of you who write, but also those who don't, very often when we start writing, it's from our heart. We usually start writing for ourselves. We write maybe a love letter that we never give because we're in love. Or perhaps we write a goodbye letter. I lost my dad when I was very young, and I wrote as a way to express these emotions. And so what happened as I started writing was that I started to share it on social media. I started to share some of my stories on LinkedIn, for example. And I realized that our stories have the power to help other people. And even though I only started writing for myself, the messages that I just told you of being rejected or perhaps feeling alone or being separated from your loved one were stories that could help people. And that's when I realized that something that started just as a little hobby had the potential to become something else. Now, I never put my hand up and said, I want to be a writer. is not really how it happened. I was already in my 40s when I started writing, and I started to follow my passion. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But this story is to share with you what I mean by the lemon tree mindset and how very often we are going to face obstacles in life. Perhaps we lose our job. Perhaps we are in a situation where we didn't want to be. Perhaps it's something at a personal level that happens, and it's that mindset of how can we turn around to make the most of what we have. So I hope that when you leave here, you all have a little seed to plant your lemon tree. And so with this, I would like to do a very short reading on one of the parts of the lemon tree mindset that I think can talk to every single one of us. There is only one you. There are 8 billion people in the world. 1 in 8 billion. That's how special you are. One of the keys to unlock your true potential is to embrace your uniqueness. There is only one you, with your personality, your skill set, and your abilities. Although society conditions us to portray your success in a certain way, the reality is that you don't need to be anyone else other than yourself to succeed. You don't need to be or have a type A personality to be a leader. You don't need to be a man to have an executive presence to be a CEO. You don't need to have a loud voice and an extroverted personality to become a public speaker. You don't need to be an English native speaker to succeed as a writer. You don't need to look a certain way to be successful in life. In spite of biases and cultural prejudices, success is a white canvas, and you don't need to be someone else to fill it. You just need to become a better version of yourself. And so, thank you. I wanted to share these and give you a little bit of context as well on how very often we think that we have to be someone else in order to be successful. And I'm going to give you an example so that we can all relate. As you can tell, I don't have a very loud voice, and I'm actually very shy and an introvert. And so I never thought that I would be able to be a public speaker, because that's not the way that society shows us what public speakers look like. They're usually big men, loud voices, big personalities, and I didn't have any of that. But it was only the moment that I realized that I didn't need to be any of that I was able to use my own voice. And all of us, we actually have something that is quite unique. They say in English this expression that I love, that everybody else is taken, so you might as well make the most of who you are and use what I call your superpowers. So when you're feeling down, when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling rejected, remember that you don't need to be anyone else. You really have everything that you need to be successful. The second one is about visualization and success. And very often we think that success is unattainable. And what I mean by this is when I started writing 3 years ago, I never believed that I would be flying to India, to this beautiful place, to speak to an audience about my writing and my stories and my philosophy. But it's really important that we actually believe in ourselves first and in what success looks like to us. I do triathlon. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the sports, but triathlon is 3 sports combined in one. So first we swim, I see some nodding, and then we ride bicycles, and then we run. And I've done this for over 10 years. I've done over 100 races, never in India though. I hope I will do that one day. And I'm sharing this because in sports, we always use the power of visualization to achieve our goals. And in fact, over 90% of Olympians, when you think about Michael Phelps or Allyson Felix or all these big names, Usain Bolt, they use the technique of visualization, which means that at that level, but also at my level, at any level, we start to picture what success looks like. So if you want to be a writer, like in my case, or if you want to be a doctor, or if you want to create your own business, what does success look like? And in fact, there's actually science that proves that the visualization technique works, meaning when you are manifesting and when you are able to picture what that finish line looks like, you are actually able to work towards it and make it happen. And for me, that's something that I believe is very important, to be able to project yourself into the future. Where you are today is one point in your life. Life is very long, it's just one point. Tomorrow, in 1 year, in 2 years, you could be somewhere different. And so I don't want to be doing all the talking, so I'm going to do a little exercise. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a few seconds and just visualize that goal that you want to achieve and what success looks like. Feel free to put your hand up when... Yes? So visualization is really, really important, because you're only able to achieve something once you're able to visualize it, whether it's a race, whether it's the business that we're talking about, whatever that is. And so that's the point number one. The point number two then is, okay, now that I can see what success looks like, and I'm going to share an example, I would love to speak at a TED Talk. It's one of my dreams. If I'm not able to visualize that, if I'm not able to dream that high, how am I going to make it? If I don't believe myself in my own goals, how am I going to get on that stage? And so that's the first step, how important it is to believe in yourself. And then it's, once you know what success looks like, where do you get started? One of the things that we do in business, and we also do in sports and pretty much in anything, is this idea of reverse engineering. So once you know that you want to get here, how do you start to go backwards and try to build those building blocks that are going to help you get there? So if I want to be a TEDx speaker, what do I need to do to get there? And I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. 2 years ago, as an introvert who has a soft voice and who is a bit shy, I started to put my hand up to speak on podcast, because I realized that I had to get over my fear. So that was the first step, starting to speak on podcast. Then from podcast, I said, well, what can I do next? And I started to do live sessions, which is very intimidating, because it's just you, like now, except that there's a screen and there's technology and you don't know who is on the other side, so very intimidating. And then from there, I started to talk to conferences, and I started to talk to companies, and I started to create my own workshops and create my keynotes and be able to speak like I'm doing today without a script. I didn't really have a whole script that I memorized. But every single one of these little steps is a building block that is helping me get to my goal. And so I would really like to challenge you as you hear me speaking, like, what does that look like for you? What is that one goal that you want to reach? What is a little step that you can do today? I was earlier on at the book library, and I met some of you already. I will be there later, by the way, if you want to get a book, if you want to have a chat, if you want to have a signed copy. And one of the persons who came to talk to me said, I love writing, but I'm terrified of sharing my writing with others and share what I do in public. How do you get over that? And I said, you have to get over yourself. Like, fear or courage is on the other side of fear. If things don't scare you, then how are you ever going to be brave? How are you ever going to be courageous? And so you have to start with that place of fear, and knowing that only when you start with fear, you can go to the other side and build courage. I always told him, like, look, what's the worst thing that can happen? Because very often our mind likes to play the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, the room is going to be empty. Worst case scenario, I'm going to forget what I want to say. Worst case scenario, people are not going to like what I write. And so we start to create all these worst case scenarios. And if I listen to that, I would not be here, because this is very intimidating. But you start from a place of fear, and only then you can go to that place of courage. And so it's really important to overcome these challenges, and don't be afraid of those worst case scenarios that are only in your mind. Also, very often those worst case scenarios that we think are so terrible, they actually happen, and they are not that bad. And I'm going to give you an example related to triathlon. My very first race, before I even started with triathlon, was a swim race. This was in Hong Kong. I had never done any swim before. And it was open water, so quite a long, like 3-kilometer race. And my biggest fear was that I was going to come last in this race. And I was going to be embarrassed, and I was going to be ashamed, and I was going to be mortified. And so I was 50-50, I was hesitant, but I showed up on the start line. And I looked around, and these people looked so fit, and everyone looked like they knew what they were doing, except for me. So I started swimming, and I was doing a bit of breaststroke, I was doing a bit of freestyle, and I looked around, and there's no one. So I kept swimming and swimming, and when I got to the beach on the other side, I looked back and I realized that there was no one. I looked on the beach and I realized that the beach was full because all the other swimmers had already finished. And so that was my worst case scenario. But you know what I did as I was approaching the beach? Even though I knew that I was the last one, when I got to the beach, I started sprinting. I wasn't sprinting to beat anyone. I wasn't sprinting to win anything. But I was sprinting because that was my journey and that was my race. And I thought that it was going to be mortifying. But in fact, the people who get the most claps are always the first and the last. So I actually got a lot of claps because people were like, yes, you made it, amazing. And so that was the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario actually ended up being the best case scenario because I was not afraid anymore of doing any race. I was not afraid of being last. I was not afraid of showing up for myself. And that is the race that actually encouraged me to sign up for a triathlon club and started doing triathlon. So back to what I was saying before about the worst case scenario and people not liking what you do and perhaps failing, even that worst case scenario is better than you not starting at all. And that's when I realized that the worst case scenario is not what you think is in your mind. The worst case scenario is not starting at all. And so that story of coming last, I always use it because so many people can relate of being the last one, being the one who fails, being the one who didn't make it. But thanks to that race, I started doing triathlon. I started racing overseas. I did the biggest triathlon in the world that is called an Ironman. It is very, very, very long. It took me, the cutoff line is 17 hours, and I did it in 12 hours 40. So it was, thank you. Yes, I think it's one of these things that you get lifelong bragging rights because it was very, very hard. But the interesting thing is that I stayed when I finished the race to see the other people who were finishing. And it was incredible. It was people of all ages. It was people with disabilities. It was people who are overweight, people who are very skinny. And so it made me realize how much potential we all have, but it always starts with believing in ourselves. So this is a little bit about the lemon tree mindset. And another topic that I wanted to talk about inside this mindset, and I talked about it a little bit at the beginning, is passion. When I was working in the corporate world, I liked the jobs that I had. They were good jobs. I had a good salary. I had a good title. But I didn't really have that fire or that purpose that I have now. I love what I do now. I think it's incredible to have this opportunity to be here. And so that brings me to the topic of passion. Because in the West, and I think here is a little bit different, we are told that our passions are for having fun and it's for our hobbies, but we have to have real jobs that bring real money. And so it never occurred to me that what I loved doing had really much to do with what I was going to do for a living and was going to help me monetize and make money. It was just not an idea. You make money so that then you enjoy life and your passions. And if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. You are doing a job that you might or might not like to then enjoy life on the weekend, or you're working until you're 65 to then start living your best life when your best years are probably behind. And so all of this experience made me realize that actually I didn't really want to do a job that I just like. life is too short to do things that you just like. I wanted to do something that I'm passionate about. And I became very interested in this idea of passion and in this idea of monetizing passion. And I'm not afraid to talk about these two things together because it's almost, there's this taboo that we cannot talk about how to make money with the things that I love, when I actually think it is the best way to pay the bills when you're actually doing something that you're passionate about. And my role model for the topic of passion is actually my mom. When we grew up, we lived in many countries because of my dad's job. And so my mom, she gave up her studies and she gave up everything to look after my sister and me. We lived in France, we lived in Brazil, we lived in the Netherlands. And so she didn't have a career. She was really a housewife and a mom, and she was an incredible mom. And then when we were very young, my dad passed away. And not only that, but we also discovered that we were bankrupt. So we were emotionally broke, and we were also financially broke. And so for years, we tried to make ends meet. I was able to get internships. That's how I was able to finish my studies. I moved to China very young when I was in my early 20s because I managed to get an internship from the Spanish government. And that's how I started my career in Asia 20 years ago. Back to my mom, during many years, she was trying to find jobs without qualification to be able to earn something. And then when she was 50, she listened to her heart and she listened to her passion. And her passion, she hadn't been able to work, but she was working. She was making amazing meals. She was always an incredible host. She learned about the cuisine from many different countries. And that was one of her big, big passions. And so what do you think she decided to do when she was 50? Any idea? Exactly. So she said, well, I don't have a diploma, I don't have a degree, but I know that I'm good at something, because she's 1 in 8 billion. And so she started to say, well, what is something that I love doing? What is something that people tell me that I'm good at? And what is something that could help me make a living out of it? And so she didn't have a lot of money, but she had a big dream. And she decided to open her own restaurant, a small restaurant in the Canary Islands that is called Telemaco. And so she brought all the recipes that she had learned from Rio when we live in Brazil, from the Netherlands, from all these different places. And around 15 years ago now, she opened this restaurant, and she had no idea about business. She had no idea about actually running a restaurant, payrolls, accounting, hiring people, but she had her passion. And 15 years later, her restaurant she's killing it. She's doing really, really well. Her restaurant, I think, is the most successful one on the island. You can check it out. And I'm very proud of having a role model like this, because that's what gave me this hope that you can listen to your passion and you can make a living out of it. And so when I think about passion, I think about my mom, but also I think of how every single individual has something, a superpower, a passion, an interest, curiosity, that can become something else. Now, I'm not saying quit everything and open your restaurant or start writing. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that very often we are shutting down all the voices and we're shutting down all our intuition. And I think it's important to take a breath and reconnect with ourselves, with what we are passionate about, and start to explore it. For me, it was writing. For my mom, it was cooking. For another friend of mine, it was about music. And so I think it's really important to go back to your passions and try to see how can it be something else. And perhaps it's a book, like when I started writing The Lemon Tree Mindset.
One doubt, I'm into cycling, so I like that triathlon aspect. So are you also considering doing the Super Randonneur, the SR, this is particular segment in cycling?
I used to do a lot of sports before I had my kids. I have 2 little girls who are 6 and 8. And so now what I try to do is balance everything that I'm doing, being a mom, writing, speaking in public, doing triathlon. And my last race was actually in Thailand in November. I did a triathlon there, but I think I'll have to wait until I'm an empty nester, they call it. So I still have a few years so that I have a little bit more of a leisure time to be able to do that.
I have one doubt that when you think to quit your corporate job, I think I quit my job in a few years back for writing. What is the thing when went through your mind on that days? I think that's a very important decision you make. That the 2 or 3 weeks you have to be in some kind of tension between your decision and your passion. What is the thinking pattern of that moments, that days?
For me, it was a little bit different than what you're describing because the pandemic took my job and I found myself in a situation that I did not expect to be in. So I think it's quite hard to say, okay, I'm going to quit my job and start something from zero. So I always recommend people to start doing something little on the side so that you don't have that pressure of starting from zero. But one of the things that really helped me, and I think this is going to address at least part of your question, is there was the one day that I decided that I was going to start writing. And for me, the question or the voice or that thing that was telling me that I had to follow it was looking at my daughters who were very young. They were 4 and 5. And I remember thinking to myself, what is the story that I want to tell them when they grow up? And for me, that question, it triggered so many things, and it unleashed so many things as well. To give you an example, one of the books that I wrote is not here, but is my biography, and it's called The Flight Home. And it's a story where I talk about why I started writing. I share pretty much everything that I've been telling you today. I talk about reinventing myself. I talk about living in 9 different countries and what that meant to me, because I wanted to be able to share my stories so that when my daughters grow up, they are able to know who their mom was. They're able to know my values. I talk a lot about values in the book. And so back to your question, I think is always going back to your why and always going back to your values. That was my question. What is the story that I want to tell my daughters when they grow up? But I think everyone is going to have their own question that links back to your why and your values. And it might be something like, what do you want to be remembered for? Or what is a cause that is really going to keep you grounded and focused? Because this thing is hard. We don't make a lot of money selling books. We don't make a lot of money going and talking out there. And so you need to have something that really keeps you motivated and grounded and focused. And for me, my pride and my passion is really my daughters. So being able to tell them when I go back to Hong Kong, this is what I did in India, and this is what India looks like, and this is Kerala, and share with them what I do and why I do what I do, that's what keeps me motivated. So I think it's about your why, it's about your motivation, and it's about the question that you have to find within yourself. Thank you.
Good evening.
Yes.
Nice. It was an accidental meeting we had at the Mathrubhumi bookstore. Okay. I have found my passion in writing about 2 years back, and I have published one book, and my second book is in the offing. And I find, as you said, that you have to find your passion to be happy all the time. How do you relate life and happiness in your present situation? That's my question.
That's a difficult one. I think first is when you're asking me about happiness, I think sometimes about what is happiness. And I read somewhere, this wasn't me, but it really resonated with me, that happiness is knowing when you're happy. And it's those little moments, because very often we take things for granted. And so for me right now, I am happy because I'm mindful of the opportunity that I have of being here. And I want to be self-aware of the moments when I am happy. One thing that I do as well is try to reframe situations. Very often we feel unhappy, but that's not very helpful. And so I always think, what is something that I can do that is going to help me reframe that situation or start something new? Or back to my example, when I was unemployed and I was not able to find a job, I was not happy. But instead of telling myself or feeling sorry for myself, I found a way to reframe that and say, well, this is an opportunity. I've been working my entire life for over 15 years, haven't had time to write, haven't had time to read, haven't had time to even think outside the corporate box. And so I think you create your happiness. And that's what I teach my daughters, because they very often have tantrums. They're at that age where they have a lot of tantrums. And adults, we have our own tantrums. We don't cry, but we also have these tantrums. Why is this happening to me? Why was I not chosen as a speaker? Why? And so I try to turn things around. And I would say create our happiness by being mindful, but also by controlling the elements that we can control within us. Thank you. Is it online? Yes, it's available online. So my latest book, and I wanted to tell you a little bit the story of this one, The Anti-Procrastinator. So this is the latest book, and it's published by Penguin Random House. And I have both books, actually. They're both on Amazon, and they're also both available at the store over there. Oh, no, the third one is you can get it online. Yes, it's called The Flight Home, so you can buy all my books online. And do we have any more questions? I want to be mindful of the public as well.
So I wanted to ask you something. So you play different roles, like a mom, you're a writer, you're a public speaker and all. How do you balance it out? So like people have a regular job and different passion as well. And it's very difficult to find a balance of doing everything. So how do you do it?
So that's a very good question. Like, how do you balance all the different things that you do? And I think it goes down to being focused. Part of it is also procrastinating. I think people for years have been talking about time management and how you manage your time. And I actually think that the conversation is not about time, it's about energy, and it's about focus. Think about 1 hour of your time, how productive or how unproductive it can be depending on your level of energy. And so for me, a question that I ask in this book actually is, what do you need to be your best? What do you need to do to be at your best? For me, I know that I have to go early to bed. I know that I need to have a good sleep. I need to exercise in the morning. I need to have my me time. So how do you create that environment where you eliminate distractions? I think social media, for example, screens, we all spend so many hours on screen. So I think be very focused so that you can really dedicate your energy to the things that matter to you. I think also very important setting boundaries, and I mean all type of boundaries, as in boundaries for your time. How do you prioritize your time? And sometimes that means saying no to certain things. It means saying no perhaps to certain people, not now. I used to say yes, I was a woman to everything, and now it's like, okay, let me get back to you in a month. Or try to really protect your time, because otherwise it's very easy to burn out. So I think you really have to find what works for you mentally, what works for you emotionally. And one of the things that I have found that works really well to have that balance also is to build your tribe. And what I mean by this is, as a triathlete, the moment that I started to get better and fitter and faster, it was not really by training more or doing more. It was by finding a community of triathletes, of people who were doing races, of people who were pushing themselves, of people who were pushing me to be a better triathlete. And the same happens with writing. If you want to be a better writer, what I do, there are so many incredible authors here. I have a bit of an imposter syndrome, and I go to them, and I'm inspired. Like some of them, they have their books translated in 22 languages. I'm like, wow, this is what I want to do. And so when you get close to those people that share this passion that we were talking about, I think that can help you unleash a lot of amazing things. So how you set yourself up for success, how you set those boundaries, how you build your own tribe so that you can all race together. Not easy.
If you are to be successful, you also need people around you to support you to become successful, and especially if you work in corporates, your team. So how do you also make them passionate? And again, maybe a broader question, but if you can share some examples or any particular things that you do in the current job or in the past.
So One of the things that I think is very important is find a network of support. Like, for example, in my case, my partner, he's my biggest fan. He's my first review, and I'm not afraid of, ashamed of saying it, for my new book. And you need that. Like, you need a partner who is going to support you, who is going to believe in your dreams. So whether you're married or you have a spouse or you don't, how do you find that support from your family? From your partners. I know that my mom, it still takes her a while to understand, but what exactly do you do? So she's very supportive, but I'm still trying to explain to her what I actually do. So I think the first thing is find that group of people that can really support you, family, friends, and so on. The second layer is what I was just talking about, of finding people who share this common passion. In my case, being a writer is honestly quite hard because you don't make a lot of money out of books. And so you have to be very creative. For me, for example, I do a lot of workshops for organizations. I do a lot of public speaking. I started to do keynotes and things like this. And connecting with other people that share the same challenge inspires me to also be more creative. For example, one of the writers was saying that for her to be able to attend a literary conference, she went to an airline and she pitched to them and she said, look, I'm going to write an article for this big newspaper. If you sponsor my trip to go to, I don't know what country it was, I can actually mention you and say a few words about, it was a Greek airline. And that little example, it was yesterday, to me, it gave me a lot of motivation. It's like, oh, maybe I can talk to Hong Kong Airlines or Hong Kong Express or something like that. So I think finding this group of people that are going to be able to support you is another one. But then something else that I talk about it in this book as well is how important it is to have role models. So people that you can look up to and they can show you what success looks like. So for me, it's authors who are here, who are much more experienced. I only started writing 2 years ago. And so that helps me stay motivated. The second layer is your peers. And we just talked about that. Other writers, other triathletes, other business people. But there's a third one that I personally found that is very motivating as well. And is you becoming someone's mentor. So finding people that you can be their mentors, they are your mentees. So how do you set up yourself so that you are helping other people? Very often I have, through social media, people who ask me, oh, Veronica, how did you get invited to this festival, for example? And so you have to carry yourself high and say, well, I also want to be someone's role model. And so it's a beautiful circle if you think about it, when you have people that you look up to, and they are your role models, but you also want to become a role model because that gives you that positive pressure that you want to help others. You want to open the path for them. I hope that next year I can perhaps bring the door for other authors in Hong Kong to come to this festival. And that's something that helps me be grounded and gives me something to look forward to. Thank you. How are we doing?
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, even when we are believing in ourselves, there are situations that we face criticism. It would be from others, but mainly it would be from ourselves. After hearing the criticism from the others, we question ourselves. So, how can we handle those situations where we criticize ourselves? How would you handle this situation?
I agree with you. I think the worst critic is often the one that lives within us. And there's a chapter actually in this book that is called Become Your Best Ambassador. And I start by explaining what is an ambassador. And an ambassador is someone who represents their country and is someone who wants to give the best representation and fight for the best interests of their country. And so that's what an ambassador does. And my question is, why can't we be our best ambassadors? Like, very often, we are the first ones to put ourselves down. For example, when I started writing and people said, oh, congratulations, you have a book. I said, yes, but I'm not really an author. I'm not really a writer. And this is not really a book. It's a small book, actually. So very often, even with language, we tend to minimize ourselves. And I think this idea of being your champion, this idea of being your best ambassador, it starts with how you talk about yourself and how you see yourself. one of the things that I personally did, because I believe in giving actionable tips, when I realized that I was not being my best ambassador, I said, I have to change this. And I did a small thing, but it was very transformational. I went to all my social media and all my signatures, and I put author. Not small author or little writer or new writer, or I put author. And when people started asking me, what do you do? I started to say, I'm an author. I'm a public speaker. There is no but, there is no end. That's what I do because I have to believe in myself. And so I think the language is something that's very, very important. I think we need to do an audit, a self-audit, and say, am I actually being my best supporter? And if not, what is holding me back? What are those anchors that we need to lift? So I think it's something that we can do every single day in the mirror to say, how can I support myself? What is one little thing that I can do to be my best supporter? So I hope this gives you some ideas. It definitely works for me, and it's something that I think we all struggle with. Another thing also is very often we are going to feel like an imposter, but then you only feel like an imposter until you do something for the first time. And then once you do it for the first time, you're like, oh, but that was easy. My 6-year-old does that. Oh, but that was easy. Now I know how to read, or I know how to go on bicycle. That was easy. Yes, it's easy the moment that you know how to do it. And so we don't overcome imposter syndrome by thinking about imposter syndrome. We overcome it by doing things. The first time that I came on a setting like this, I was terrified, and it was a big deal. And then I did it, and I went out of the stage, and I was like, that wasn't really a big deal. So I think if you want to be your best ambassador, it's the way that you think, but it's also with action. So you do it one time, and you do it a second time, and I guarantee that by the 10th time, you might feel more confident, and that confidence is going to help you believe in yourself. So I think action is important. Thank you.
My question is something you mentioned about the worst case scenario, and which resonates equal to fear of failure. Nowadays, we listen a lot about allowing noble failures, and to my 6-year-old daughter, I might allow that failure to her. But we have still in our society, there are few people with a stigma that if you fail once, then you're good for nothing, and which will definitely impact the self that we have, and we don't push ourselves from there. Do you feel some kind of stigma around the society there, where you still feel that allowing noble failures is still there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, yes, the stigma is there. And there's always someone who is going to judge. But I think that ultimately, it's really what you make out of failure. And I'm going to share a real example. When I published this book, I looked for publishers, and I couldn't find any. So after 10 or 20 applications, I realized that I wasn't going to find a publisher. I didn't have a big following. I was new. So in that regard, it was a failure. I wasn't able to find a publisher. And then back to everything that we've been talking about today, I said, well, what can I do about it? Because I really want to publish my book. I think I have a story that can help people. So I decided to learn about self-publishing. And I said, I'm going to start watching tutorials, and I'm going to start reading, and I'm going to start studying. And so I spent hours and hours and hours learning about that industry. And 2 months later, I was able to self-publish. So this one is self-published. So that was my way of dealing with rejection. But then what's interesting is that I realized that I had all this knowledge about publishing a book. I knew the Amazon system inside out. I knew about pricing. I knew about royalties. And people were asking me, how did you self-publish? I also want to self-publish. So I was like, oh, it's not only me who is not able to get a publisher. So I had all this knowledge that I had learned because I had failed and because I hadn't been successful. And so what I did with that, I wrote a digital guide that is called From Zero to Amazon Bestseller to help people self-publish on Amazon, to help people be able to publish their own book even if they failed at having a publisher. And so back to what you're saying, failure, when other people see it as failure, I think what matters is the way that you see it, because this book has still not been published, and I'm not looking for publishers anymore. I'm very happy to talk about my book here. And what's amazing is that if I hadn't published this book, and if I hadn't failed, and if I hadn't had all these trajectory that pushed me to be better and to not give up and to have more perseverance, 2 years later, I wouldn't have signed a book with the biggest publisher in the world. And so, was this a failure? It depends. Not for me. So, turning things around. Thank you.
I'm also a mom of an 8-year-old daughter. So I would like to just chat about that. How do you motivate your daughters to at least do something passionate like this? Maybe something small tips. You would have started with the small things maybe right now, right? So to focus or whatever it is, they may be having a different passion at this time and their interest might be different. But still, what do you talk to them generally as a person like you?
Sure. So thank you for that question. And I have 2 daughters, Alba and Maya, and the oldest one is 8. And when she was 6 or so, she started to see that mommy is a writer. So now when people ask her, she said, my mommy is a writer. And she started to have this passion as well for reading, I think partly because that's what she sees. And one day when I published another book that is not here, she said, Mommy, I would love to publish a book. And I was like, that's great, but I have no idea about publishing kids' books because that's quite different. And so she told me that she had this passion, and this is just an example, but I said, okay, you write a book, I'll help you edit it, and I will learn how to publish a children's book. Now, she's very stubborn, just like me. And so 2 days later, she came back with a little booklet, and she said, Mommy, my book is here. And I said, oh, okay. And it was the story of the little rabbit. It's a little rabbit that was very tiny and was bullied at school. And so finally this little rabbit scared the fox away, and all the big rabbits say, hooray, to the big rabbit. So that was the story. And so that was her passion. And what we did, I said, okay, Alba, I have to learn how to self-publish a children's book. And so we got together as a team, and we started to look for illustrators to do the drawings of the little rabbit. I learned how to publish a book for children, which is a little bit different on Amazon. And her book is out there. So it's actually a book that you can buy as well. But it's called The Story of the Little Rabbit. And the amazing thing is that children have their passion, and I think as parents it's amazing how we can be enablers. So if there is something that your daughter is passionate about, perhaps it's cooking or something else, like how maybe you can become that enabler. So I hope that example gives you an idea.